All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live and pumped up. This is going to be good. I put some work into this. This is going to be good. If my voice is going to fail, I'm sorry. I am actually quite sick, but told myself I wasn't going to skip this one, and I think we're going to be okay. I got my water here. Should be fine. I'm going to say hi in the chat just so you guys know that this is working. And then we are going to get started with this. If somebody's here, please let me know. Write hi in the chat back so I know everything is set up correctly. And then we're going to get going. Ziggy is there as always, my man. Thank you so much, Aligun. The regulars are here. It's very nice to have you as always. And yeah, then let's get going. Okay, we have a lot to cover. This may take quite a while, but I think it's going to be a good one. So one last time, we're going to go through this annoying intro, but once again, it has to be said. My name is Jan, founder of Swimmazing University. Won international medals in pool and open water swimming. 3 German records, 38 medals at German Nationals, NCAA All-American, Florida Gator alumni, so trained under Greg Troy, Anthony Nesty, Martin Wilby, just to name a few of the world's best coaches out there, alongside Ryan Lochte, to name one of the GOATs of swimming all time. I coached Sebastian Kienle in swimming from 2012 till 2015. Those who know your stats know that this is the time while he won the Kona Crown, and he was also in the first swim group while he was swimming with me. First and only time. Take that as you may. And then I coached Washi, Andreas Waschburger, this past summer to the world record in the English Channel. And I built up many, many elite swimmers from youth level to German elite and international status. Viele Grüße aus Frankfurt. Thank you, Anja. Viele Grüße zurück. And yeah, I'm here to help you figure out distance swimming. Okay, with that out of the way, again, I'm not doing this to brag. I'm just doing this to make sure that people who watch this for the first time know who I am and know that I know what I'm talking about. Okay, what's coming up on this channel? Weekly live stream just like this one, Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Central European Time. This may or may not be true in the future because this is the last one from this series. And Tuesday is probably going to be a regular YouTube video from here on out. I'm going to focus on teaching rather than entertainment. I'm always trying to be entertaining at the same time. My goal is to make it easy for you to understand. I'm not throwing around any big words. I hope not. I'm here to get information from myself to you. Okay, I'm not here to impress you with big words. And yeah, the goal is to make you a good distance freestyle swimmer, which you all are as triathletes. 1 second, my dogs need to sit the F down. Geh mal in euer Korb. Auf geht's. Platz. Platz, Vicky. Platz. Geh in deinen Korb. Okay, and we're back. This was German for the dog to sit down, because if they run around in circles, they drive me crazy. Back to the topic. This is what we have covered so far, and this is going to be important for today because we are going to put all of this together. I'm going to be putting these past live streams into a playlist for all of you who have missed this stuff up to this point, so you can rewatch it. Maybe I'm even going to put them in podcasts. I don't know. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Maybe I am. I don't know yet. But basically, this is what we covered. Paul is also here. Awesome. Big greetings to my dog. It's actually 2 of them. Thank you. And yeah, so we're putting this together. And yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to watch the past streams to really understand all of these topics in detail. But I will do my, Florian also there, hi, do my best to explain this stuff today as well. Okay, so first of all, for starters, what is a swim season for Ironman athletes? And realistically, we're looking at 2 real training cycles. Okay, usually a season is divided into 3 cycles. Okay, so 1 big macro cycle, 3 big microcycles. Okay, and these are again divided into individual sessions. Okay, you could also kind of talk about long-term goals, midterm goals, and short-term goals within these cycles, but topic for another day. Just keep it simple. 3 cycles. The first one usually starts probably around October where everybody gets done with their last races, and usually the athletes take 2 to 3 months off. Maybe they don't take completely off, maybe they go hiking, mountain biking, they stay active, but they don't necessarily continue their normal training routine. Okay, that's usually the first cycle for triathletes. The second cycle, or in this case, I'm calling it the first cycle, is the cycle that builds towards the qualification race. Okay, I'm addressing people here now that want to qualify for Kona. If you are not on that level yet, Simon, okay, hi. If you're not on that level yet, then you can think of it as your first main peak race of the season. Okay, usually people race the first time in May, maybe early June, and then they usually finish off the season in September. Okay, you can think of it that way also. So that's the first cycle, and the second cycle builds towards the main race in September, October, aka Kona or whatever world championships you're qualified for. Okay. The training input, volume, and intensity varies from cycle to cycle. And it obviously varies within each cycle. Okay, that's why we're talked about all these things here in the past. We have all these tools in our toolbox to put together a full training plan. And I'm going to do my best to explain how to do this today. So, what do we always start with for the people in the chat? What do you think? What's the very first thing when you are sitting down to structure a season? What would you start with? Take a second and write in the chat. Let's think about this. No wrong answers. Write something. If nobody wants to write anything, give you 5 more seconds, then I'm going to give you the answer. Okay, nobody yet. Okay, you need to think very, very basic in the beginning. Ausdauer. Yes, that's very specific. That's already good, but way more basic than that. Way more basic than that. Very, very beginning, before you do anything. Here's what we do, okay? This goes back to our very first live stream. You always start with evaluating where you are at the moment, okay? What is the status quo? Like, what is right now? What's your shape? Have you been injured? Have you been training? What is happening right now? Okay, so completely different. For example, if you start the first cycle, you start out completely different and at a completely different state than when you start in the second cycle. First cycle, you need to build up. Second cycle, you're coming straight out of probably peak performance, and you try to repeat or even better that peak performance by just a little bit for the second cycle. Okay, so that's the beginning you have to start with. You always analyze the last season, or even better, I could have written down the last cycle. You analyze what went well, what didn't go well. For example, did I train? Was I sick a lot? If you got sick a lot, maybe an indication that the training was too hard. Okay. Did the goals that I set out in the beginning actually came to fruition? Okay. For example, if I said I wanted to work on my VO2 max and I have the means and the opportunities to get that tested, did I increase my VO2 max or not? Okay, if yes, great. If not, you have to look for reasons why it didn't work. Okay, so you have to analyze your status, like where you're at right now, and you have to analyze the last cycle or the last season in order to learn and adapt. Then you have to set clear goals. Okay, one example I just gave you. For example, improve your VO2 max. For example, if you had a great Ironman last year, but you fell apart the run, maybe you want to improve your run. Here we don't care about running, we care about swimming. So you want to improve your swimming, came to the right place, and yeah, set goals according to that. It's always better to set discipline goals versus performance goals. And let me explain by that. Let me explain what I mean by that. It is always a problem if you go and you make it your goal to come in third at the World Championships, because that's not necessarily within your control. What is in your control is if you make it a goal to say, this year, I will train 20 hours on average each week. I understand you may get sick. I understand you may get injured, but let's say everything goes normal. This is my goal. Okay, it's a commitment goal. It's a discipline goal. And if you stick to these kind of things, the performance goals will take care of themselves. Of course, you should have some numbers in mind. So you should have some performance goals. Like I said, I don't like having places in mind. I would work with times, and in times I mean times that I can actually reliably measure. In my opinion, it has to be done in the pool. If you run, it has to be done on a distance on the track or on a distance that you run exactly the same time each time, so that you can compare these things. Okay, so it needs to be measurable. You need to actually track and measure if you're improving. Okay, and then you make a plan and you commit to it. How do we start that process? You always start with dates of your races, training camps, and coachings, etc. Okay, you need to have certain dates. If you want to work with a cycle, you have to have dates. Otherwise, you don't have a cycle. Okay, each cycle ends with a main competition. Okay, so you have to have dates. You have to know when your competition is, and you have to structure and work towards that specific date. So no dates, no cycles. Okay, so sit down, know your dates, know your competitions, and plan out your season accordingly. Then you realistically put together your time commitment or your plan. You need to know how much time can you actually invest into your training. Trust me, it's very easy to write down 25 hours of training in a week. Or it's very easy to write down 5 swim practices in a week. Doesn't look like much, but then life comes in the way. Most of you guys have a job. Most of you guys have a family, and you need to be realistic, because if you're not, it leads to frustration, and frustration leads to, I don't know, I don't want to sound like like Yoda from Star Wars, but it goes into a downward spiral. Okay, doesn't necessarily lead to the dark side of the Force, if you know what I mean, if you're on the inside here, but you know what I mean. It's a downward spiral. Okay, and once you've done all that, you simply follow the plan to the best of your abilities. Okay, be clever. If you're getting sick, adjust. But other than that, follow the plan. Okay, what comes after that? I personally, this is how I do it. I always start with volume, at least with my middle distance and distance guys. With sprinters, it's a little bit different. I don't care about volume with sprinters. But with my middle distance and distance guys, I always start with volume. I take the final date, and then I pick my weekly volume that I want to hit. And then after that, I structure everything else. Okay, this is how I started with the 16-week plan. This is how I start with my pool swimmers. This is how I always do it. I'm not necessarily saying it's the right way to do it. This is how I do it. Worked for me. And I don't know, if you have other coaches, you can ask them how they do it. I think the volume approach works just fine. I then put together an outline, which each training's purpose. Okay, at this point, I still have not written a single training yet. I'm only outlining how much volume I want to do from week to week leading up to my main event. And then after I've done that, I fill these weeks with the training stimuli, you could say, that I want to use. By that, I mean, when am I going to use aerobic interval training, aerobic long swim, strength, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Within that outline, I think about the volume and the training types I want to use. Okay, those are the training types I just showed you. And then I tailor the plan towards the target date where I want peak performance. And that's it. Okay, this sounds super simple now, but it kind of is if you know what you're doing. But it gets tricky, and you need to make it interesting for your athletes or for yourself. And if you are working one-on-one with somebody, you really need to adjust. Like with my swimmers, I always need to adjust. That's why with my swimmers, I never really write training plans ahead of time. I write them from day to day. I think if you're really working closely with somebody, this is good. If you can write weekly to weekly also, this is okay. But I think day to day would be the ideal thing. Okay, and what comes next now is actually the outline that I put together for the 16-week Ironman preparation course that I have been building. 1 second, I have a question coming in from Horst. Hi, I plan to take part in 3 long-distance open water competitions in June, July, and August, 4 kilometers. Is it okay to swim 3 times a week with 1 endurance swimming, 2 to 5K, and 2 technical trainings? No. I think Horst, if you only swim 3 times in a week, the week has 7 days. If you swim 3, you have 4 rest days. Okay? If you don't do anything on 4 days, you can go hard on the 3 days that you swim. Okay, so I would do a long endurance swim, I would do an aerobic interval session, and I would do a strength session as a default. Once you get closer to the race, pay attention to what's happening here, then you can adjust it a little bit. But I would not do, if you only swim 3 times, you need to make every one of those count, because your rest days are the days when you don't swim. But thank you for your question. Okay, so let's jump into this. This is exactly the outline of the 16-week course. There are already small adjustments that are made for the group that already did this. But this is what this looks like. Okay, we start out with 3K. Now, these are ambitious triathletes who want to actually go to Hawaii. Some of them even want to turn pro. And the idea here with these 16 weeks is to get them in the best shape possible at the end of the 6 weeks. After that, we taper off. 1 second, my throat is kind of killing me. Okay, so what you see here in the first 4 weeks, there's really not that much hard stuff happening. And those people who are reading VO2 max and are jumping off their seat and saying, oh my God, first training session, VO2 max. The VO2 max I'm talking about here is the kind of VO2 max approach where you go high volume, low intensity. Okay, this is a great way to improve VO2 max. You don't have to go HIIT. You don't have to go super hard. If you just do baseline stuff, very good proven method to build up your VO2 max. One of many, okay? So keep that in mind. So low intensity, technique, little bit of strength already, but these are all very easy sessions. I'm not going to show you the sessions in detail. You can talk to me afterwards. Maybe we can get together, but this is the outline that I'm using, okay? So in week 1, all of the sessions are right around 3K. In week 2, right around 3.3K, then 3.6. And then every 4th week, we're doing a recovery week where we're backing down a little bit once again. Okay, so you can see we're jumping up around 10% in volume from week to week. This is, in my opinion and from my experience, absolutely reasonable. You can do that, okay? This is the second 4-week cycle. You can see that in the beginning, we're now week 5 and 6, we're still fairly low in intensity. You can see that things are green and yellow. My intensity zones are here. The darker the color gets, the higher the intensity will be. And still no super tough sets. And then here we're starting to get into strong strength sets, strong aerobic interval sessions, a 3,000 meter test towards the end. And we're already creeping up on 4K volume per training session. Then this is the third 4-week cycle, and here I made changes that are not in here yet. These VO2 max sessions are replaced, all of them, by short rest sessions, other than in week 4 where we're resting off a little bit. Okay, so this is short rest now. I made the adjustment along the way because I kind of wanted some more intensity and it worked out okay. So you can see from here, if you imagine these ones being orange, we're now adding quite a bit of intensity. Okay, the athletes are now building up to 4.5K per session. Again, we're using the 4th week recovery. We're repeating the 400 meter test to see how things were going. In the test group, the 400 meter tests all improved, even though it was not so easy to see because the group, some of them did them short course meters, and then the second test they did long course meters with me in Saarbrücken. But nonetheless, they got faster. And then this is the final 4 weeks, and these were tough. So again, I may or may not adjust because we went all the way up to 5K and they really got tired. And here you can see orange, we have aerobic threshold, so pacing stuff, and we have a 300 meter test. And from the people that provided times, all of them improved in the 300 meter test. Despite at this point obviously being very tired. Okay? So at the end of these 4 months, you are probably in the best swim shape of your life. Does that mean you're in the fastest shape of your life yet? No, because you still need to rest. But as far as your swimming fitness goes, this is going to be the best shape of your life. Okay? And then once this is over, this is how I generally would approach taper. This is from within my membership. And yeah, I didn't put colors in here, but you can see, for example, the aerobic long swims are replaced by open water wetsuit swims. So the athletes get used to being in open water and getting used to their equipment. We see lactate threshold every week. And basically the idea here is then to really get ready for race day. You know, get used to your equipment, get used to the lactate that you're going to obviously be faced with in your start when the gun goes off. And we are also reducing the overall volume here towards the end by 20%. I think in reality it's a little bit more than that. But if you watch my video on taper, which I highly recommend you do, you will see that this is a very individual thing and you need to work with this 1 or 2 times and figure out what works for you. Okay, but this is a general guideline that should work just fine. And yeah, this is how this works. Okay, so basically here, you're in the best shape of your life towards the end. You're really fit, but also really tired. So basically you can almost take anything that's been thrown at you in training. You're not going to fall apart anymore. You can pull 3K at a very high level. You can power through these 3K tests and that's all good, but you're not super fast yet because you're still too tired. Then here, the idea here is to get you recovered and feeling great when the actual race is going to happen. Okay. Real quick, one more time. What do these things mean? Aerobic interval training. Within a cycle and how you use it within a cycle. Within a cycle, you implement this method right away. Okay, you don't wait. I'm not a fan of doing 4 weeks of just basically nothing, floating back and forth and only doing swim drills. I guess if you have a super long cycle, you could, but I'm a great fan of getting to work right away. Basically, you grow from low volume and small increments, an example 12 times 50, to high volume with long increments, for example 8 times 400, and back down to low volume and small increments, back to 12 times 50s. Okay, that's the idea. In the beginning, smaller increments, overall lower volume, because your body is not used to this yet. I mean, we're trying to work towards being able to tolerate swimming at our threshold for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, maybe even an hour. But in the beginning, we're not used to this yet. You need to build this up. Excuse me. You cannot do this in the beginning of the season and expect this to go well. You need to lay a foundation, and then it's going to be okay. So please follow these guidelines. If you write your training plans by yourself, very important. Go from low volume and small increments to high volume and long increments, and back down to low volume and small increments. Adjust according to level of fatigue. This is the one thing that you can do differently. If you are, for example, in this phase right here, where you're swimming 5,000 per training session as your highest volume, and you realize that you have a really hard time to maintain the quality in your main sets, for example, in the aerobic interval sets, then I think it's a good idea to mix the small intervals back into your training. Now, that does not mean that that the interval session is going to be 1250s. By no means, but it can be, for example, 800 pull, a little bit lower interval, plus 850s at higher pace. Okay, 2 or 3 cycles. This means that the overall aerobic interval set is still very high in volume, but the parts where you're really looking for quality and speed, swum in full freestyle without equipment, are going to be shorter, and therefore it's easier to hit your quality and your target times. Something to keep in mind, I like doing that because from experience, back in my days, when we used to swim more than 85K a week, 90K a week, it was very, very hard to still maintain quality in those important weekly sets. Okay, my coach kept pushing through and we did great, but I generally like to still see the pace that relates to racing. And if I don't see this anymore, I like to shorten these things. Again, different approach, try these things for yourself. Okay, strength is very similar approach to aerobic interval training. These two methods are very closely related. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. Watch the old streams if you're interested. One thing that is important, do not start with strength right away. Those of you who paid attention said, wait a second, you have a strength session right in the third training session. Yes, what you're probably going to see is a very, very light strength session. Maybe some 50s with paddles, maybe some 50s with t-shirts, nothing much. Certainly not something like 10 times 300 pull with paddles. Not going to see that in week 1. Okay, so if you make the set a little bit easier, it works. Okay, do not start with strength right away. Another reason for this is that the shoulders tend to be in danger after the off season. Why is that? I think all the muscles around your rotator cuff tend to also shrink a little bit, and that leads to a little bit more instability, and that can lead to inflammation in your shoulder joint. That's why you need to build up first, get this back up to full strength, and then you can start using the paddles. Don't start with paddles, with big paddles on long sets right away. Okay, and then short rest sets. Again, these are my favorite. I think these are amazing. I tend to start these a little bit later. I think you need to be prepared because this stuff is kind of hard. And if you don't have a good base pace foundation, if you didn't build up your VO2 max with the low intensity, high volume kind of thing, it's going to be hard. They're going to break you, and you want to be prepared. And if you are prepared, this is a great tool to get very, very fast improvements in your overall swim shape. Again, for short rests, also watch one of my previous streams. Other than that, the same principle applies. Here I posted a statistical bell curve because it's somewhat how this works. Imagine this being skewed towards the right. So this goes a little bit shallower, peaks over here, and then goes down a little bit steeper. Okay, so it climbs a little bit shallower and then it goes down a little bit steeper, pointed towards the right. This is how you can think of your overall cycle volume also. Okay, you can see this here also. We're 3K, 3.3, kind of goes shallow, shallow, 5K here. And then, oh, I'm just seeing I have this double. Delete this. And then here in the taper, we're still here, and then it drops off significantly when we taper. And that tends to work the best, at least for distance people. Okay, and then after that, we have the lactate threshold sets. These are very important the closer you get to your competition. These are not nearly as important for Ironman athletes as they are for swimmers, because generally you don't need these absolute very high lactate regions for your performance. You need to be very good around your anaerobic threshold. That being said, these days you need to be able to withstand a fast swim start. Fast swim start means obviously building up lactate acid. So if you have not prepared for that, you're going to fail. It's going to hurt. You're going to miss your group, and we don't want that. So I would recommend 6 to 8 weeks out of your race day to start implementing these lactate threshold sets. And this is exactly what happened here. We first see them here in basically week 13. Here the 3K test kind of goes in that direction. Not really, but also tough. And then we have them here, here, and here. Okay, so we work 4 to 5 weeks pretty rigorously. That's not a word. Pretty hard on that stuff. Say it like that. Okay, and yeah, it's very, very important to be prepared and ready for that kind of work, because it is a lot of stress on your body. And if you do this too early, you're going to fall apart. The likelihood of getting sick increases by a lot. So you really need to have a foundation. You need to be well along into your season before you implement these high lactate threshold sets into your training routine. Foundation is laid in previous weeks, and obviously quality matters a ton in this approach. If you cannot produce lactate, you're wasting your time. I mean, obviously, if we're working on lactate threshold, we need to have high lactate in our system when we train these things. Okay, and then dryland training, think of it as maintenance rather than training. And what I mean by that, remember that you are a triathlete and not a CrossFit athlete. You can only do so much. Again, my plan that I'm presenting to you here is geared towards very ambitious athletes, because if you do what I'm telling you to do here, you are already spending around 6 hours a week just in the pool. And then you still have to run and you still have to bike. And obviously you need to do that on a high level also, because otherwise you wouldn't get to Kona. Therefore, you need to keep in mind how much time you really have. And also you cannot do everything all out. I know a lot of people are very ambitious and they want to do great in everything, but think of it as a supplement, maintenance. Okay, these things are done so you don't get shoulder injuries. These things are done so you don't lose your posture while you swim, run, or bike. These are not done because you want to do a new personal best record in how many push-ups you can do. That's not the way you should approach this. Okay, my personal opinion, feel free to try yourself, but think of it as a supplement. Okay, it should be used regularly for very short periods of time. What I mean by that, because it kind of sounds contradictory, is I would prefer somebody to do 3 times a week, 12 minutes of dryland training before you enter the water in your swim session, over somebody who does 1 hour every other week. Okay, consistency in small increments always beats these one big gigantic efforts. And it doesn't take much. If you consistently put 10 to 15 minutes in and do a little bit of core work, ab work, a little bit of athletic stuff, you're going to be fine. Doesn't take much. Okay, make it so that it fits easily into your other training routine. I just said do it right before you swim. That's one way. Whatever. Do it before you run. Just make sure that it doesn't take much more energy and time than you're already spending. Okay, and then taper. This is a big one. Again, I recommend watching my stream about taper because this is very important, and I talked about it for like 30 minutes and we don't have 30 minutes here. So for me, this starts around 4 weeks ahead of your main competition. Okay, main competition, this is important. Mobility, yes, good point. I didn't write mobility, but mobility is also part of your maintenance. Okay, better mobility leads to higher range of motion. Higher range of motion leads to less stress into your joints, technically, until you overdo it and you get hypermobile. And yeah, you should do it. Okay, great way to work on your mobility is to do it, for example, while you watch ESPN or while you watch in Germany Tagesschau or whatever you watch. I don't care what you watch whatever you like. But if you're watching TV, for example, that's a great time to work on your mobility. Okay. Can you say more about how much volume is good? In a second, yes, because this depends. Okay, this is a very, very individual question and depends on where you start and what you've done in the past. Again, the outline that I've done here is for people who are on a high level and want to crush an Ironman swim. Actually, before I forget it, let's get into this. Your question refers to like how much volume is good. This goes all the way back to here. You have to start to evaluate with where you're at right now. Okay, you have to write down what have I been able to do in the past, how much was that, and then this is basically the baseline of where you start with your volume. And then you also want to gradually increase by 5 to 10% each week as a general guideline. Again, I said this in the past, if you're a beginner, volume doesn't matter at all. It really does not. In the beginning, when you just start out swimming freestyle, the emphasis is on learning how to swim freestyle. The emphasis is not about training, it's not conditioning, it's about learning the range of motion, learning how to coordinate your hand and your feet, and volume really doesn't matter. If it's 700, great. If it's 1200, great. If it's 1500, great. Whatever, how much time you have. But you shouldn't be counting volume in the beginning. You should be counting quality of your swim. Okay, but Ali Gun, this is a very, very individual question. It's very hard for me to answer this because it's different for everybody. What volume is right? But here, this slide here is where you need to start to figure this out for yourself. Okay, so taper starts 4 weeks ahead of the main race. And taper does not mean to just sit around and stop training. A lot of people think of taper as, okay, yoo-hoo, party time, I don't do anything anymore. That's very far away from the truth. The definition for taper for me is that we are preparing our body for the best possible race day that it can provide, okay? And that means we have to rest our body to the best of its ability while maintaining our conditioning, okay? And we need to do things that make us feel great on race day, okay? Sleep, drink, hydrate, stretch, finding the right volume that works for you. Again, this is very individual, but this is the idea of taper. The only reason we taper is that we feel great when the race day actually happens. But again, I did a whole stream on it. Yeah, you should watch that. Okay, and this is basically it. If you need help, if you're looking for a training plan, call me. Okay, schedule a call. Calendly link is in the description. It's on my homepage. And tell your friends who are also clueless about sorry, I was just honest, who is also clueless about swimming, most of you probably are, to watch the stream. If this was all presented in a way that you could not understand anything, now is the time to ask questions. I will do my best to help you guys. There are many ways to roam. This one works. I've done it many, many times. I've done it myself. I've done it with my athletes. And it works really, really well. If you want to improve, I strongly suggest you get help. If not, use this stuff and try to build it yourself. This looks far easier than it actually is. Okay, I think we can all agree that the stuff that I presented to you now is not super complicated, but making all those things connect to one another and make sense within one another is actually quite complicated. I tried my very hardest within the last 11 streams to give you everything that you need. Nonetheless, it's going to be hard. Whew, okay, so this was it. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them, please. As always, if you want to ask the questions later, I will do my best to answer anything in the comments as well. Didn't take as long as I thought. 38 minutes. It was pretty good. Okay, while you think about your questions, quick summary, real quick. You're working basically with 4 tools. The 4 tools are aerobic interval training, aerobic long swims, strength, short rest sets. Later on, when you get closer to your competition, you add lactate threshold sets. Okay? These are your tools. These tools you're putting together within a training cycle where you're adding volume and intensity and where you're dropping down towards the end. You need to be careful with how you use these tools. For example, aerobic interval training, you go from short volume and short increments to high and back. And this is almost true for all of these. And then you need to put them together in an order that makes sense. Okay, I tend to like to start out with a short rest set. Then I usually do an aerobic long swim. Then I usually have one easy swim. And then I usually add strength or aerobic interval. It's just how I do it. You can do it however you like. Okay. So we have these tools. Then once you have the tools, you sit down, you pick your date. You count backwards. How many weeks is that towards your date? I would go backwards always. I know I need 3 to 4 weeks to taper. So I map those 3 weeks out. Then I know before that I need to be basically at my highest volume and at my highest intensity. You should know where you want to go. So you write that down, and then you go gradually back down to where you want to start. And then you go from here to here to here to here to taper, and that's basically it. It's not super rocket science, but yeah, like I said, it's tricky to make it all work, and it's tricky to adjust and to do the right things when you get off track. I mean, that's basically what separates people who do it well from people who have no idea. And yeah, that is it. I hope you learned something. I hope it wasn't too bad with my coughing and my sore throat. And yeah, like I said, if you have questions, you feel free to ask them, and if not, then we're gonna call it a day. And we're gonna see each other on Thursday. I don't know what I'm going to do on Thursday yet. Maybe I'm going to do a normal YouTube video, because I think it was Siggy. He posted some great questions that I can answer in a normal video. We don't need to go live for that. I can actually try and see how I'm doing with a normal YouTube video, and I'm going to do my best here. Okay, Florian, is the fact that I lose my sprint ability in training a good sign when I do 25-meter sprints? So the muscle transform more to slow twitch. I think so, yes. I think that is this is a great topic, and one that a lot of people get wrong. A lot of people, when they talk about base pace for distance athletes, so they always say, oh, I need to improve my 100-meter time to get a faster 1500-meter time. And to some extent, this is a true statement. But you do not improve your 100-meter time as a distance athlete by doing 25-meter sprints. Take my word for that. That's the worst approach that you can take. If you start to train like a sprinter, guess what happens? Just take a second. Guess what happens if you train like a sprinter? Rocket science. Let me tell you, you become a sprinter. Obviously, if you train like a sprinter, you become a sprinter. But you're going to be a shitty sprinter because you've trained long distance before, and just like Florian just said, you already messed up your fast twitch muscle fibers with that training approach. So you're just going to be a really sluggish, slow sprinter. What does that mean, being a sprinter? A sprinter means that you might be faster in the first 25. As a matter of fact, you will be faster in the first 25. Your 100 will very likely already be slower, and your 1500 is going to be way slower. So do yourself a favor and don't do that. If you want to work on your base pace training, you do exactly what we've done here, and you are going to improve. Okay, you could, for example, if you know that you're really slow, you could keep your aerobic interval sets always with some shorter increments mixed with some longer stuff. But okay, you can always work in a little bit higher of intensity and speed kind of areas. But don't just sprint. Take my word for it, that's going to do exactly nothing for you other than that you're going to get slower overall. One of the biggest misconceptions out there ever, that people think that the base pace or the base speed, ground speed they always call it in the 100, that you do this with 25s as a long distance guy, is about the wrongest approach you can ever take. So please don't do that. Okay, but overall, to answer your question, it's normal, especially if you're in a high volume. I think you were talking about moving up a level now. If you're tired, it's absolutely normal that you're a little bit slower in your overall total speed. Part of the gig. It should come back when you taper. You're going to be fine. Okay, but good question. Thank you. Good. I think we're done. I think we're here for 45 minutes. If there are no more questions, we're going to call it a day. As always, thank you so much for being here. If you like all that stuff and you want to hop on a call, schedule your call. No strings attached. Made them 45 minutes long now. And yeah, if you think this was good, share it with your friends. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you on Thursday. Okay, maybe not live, but I will see you with some sort of output on YouTube. Okay, have a great evening. All the best. Go swim, train hard, and I will see you in the future. Bye bye. Thanks for taking part.